I was playing, Lane.
I didn't think it polite to listen to her.
Oh, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I leave science for life.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Blacknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that last Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that in a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I assume it's the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often noticed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself. I have only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it's not very interesting. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That'll do, Lane, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders can't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Ooh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Hello? Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, well, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of you being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
But I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It's perfectly romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic in a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
Oh, I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on the subject, my dear fellow. Divorces are made in heaven. Oh, please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some of the bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn.
Ooh.
Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear boy, you need not ease for you to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I dare say you never will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, she'll first have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by the name of Cecily? I don't know. Anyone by the name of Cecily?
Bring me the cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to say you have had my cigarette case all this time? Oh, Algy, I wish to goodness you'd let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no use offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I see the thing is not yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You have seen me with it 100 times, and you've no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it's absurd to have hard and fast rules about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite well aware of that fact, and I'm not prepared to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, Cecily just so happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt who lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear boy, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. Why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest, you look as if your name was Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying you're not being earnest. It's written on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if ever you try to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in the town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that's not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily calls you her dear uncle. Come on, boy. Come on, boy, you must fit everything out at once.
My dear boy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
That's exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being confirmed in secret bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by bunburyist?
I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
Oh, my dear boy, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prison.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected as much, my dear fellow. I've bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know if you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, One has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it was either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to those people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you're a Bunburyist. You're the most advanced Bunburyist I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to join with me anywhere tonight.
I know, you're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people quite so much as not receiving invitations.
I think you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I have no intention of doing anything of the kind. In the first place, I dine there on Monday. Once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with no women at all, or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well who she'll place me next to tonight. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It just looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I'm going to be a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him anyway. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Earnest, and I strongly advise you do the same with your with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Oh, nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realise that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama have been propounding for the last 50 years.
That the happy English home is proof in half the time.
Oh, don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get Aunt Augusta out of the way for 10 minutes, in order that you might have the opportunity to propose to Gwendolen, will you allow me to dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you're smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
I hope I'm not that. That would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolyn, won't you come and sit over here?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
Oh, that'll do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
Well, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
Well, the hair's turned quite gold from grief.
Well, it certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. Oh, thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. Oh, she is such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
Oh, I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your poor uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me, Aunt Augusta. The fact is, I've just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is quite absurd. I do not support the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice of it, as far as any improvement in his ailment is concerned. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, for me, to be so kind as to not have a relapse on Saturday, because I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everybody has said practically whatever they were going to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. The music, of course, is a great difficulty. You see, one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I have drawn out if you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm certain the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and I believe is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Yes, Mamma.
Charming day. It is, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
But I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, As I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, the fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you have made me.
Oh, my own Earnest.
You don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
But your name is Earnest.
Oh, yes, of course it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, well, this is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, have very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, really, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't really care much about the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I think that there are lots of much nicer names out there. Think Jack, for instance. A charming name.
Jack? Oh, no, there's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only real, safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Oh, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you then?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it's only fair to tell you, quite frankly beforehand, that I'm fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have very little practice in how to propose.
But my own one. I have loved no one in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What beautiful eyes you have, Earnest. I hope you'll always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, but you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she can be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma?
In the carriage, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mamma.
Bracknell, that I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you, you are not down on my list of eligible young men, though I have the same list the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I do smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires marriage should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
Well, I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes, possibly leading to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 per year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties extracted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I do have a house in the country, of course, with some land attached to it. I believe 1,500 acres, but I don't rely on any of that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can tell, it is the poachers who are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoilt nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a townhouse in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to a Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham, I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is hardly a guarantee of respectability of character. What number, Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. Well, anyway, that can easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Oh, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Well, come in the evening, at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Oh, to lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? Evidently he was a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers would call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I have said that I've lost both my parents. It may be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes, the old late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he just so happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was found in a handbag, a somewhat large, brown, leather-clad handbag with handles attached to it. A perfectly ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess that I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate, bred in a handbag, whether it had handles on it or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, while the cloakroom of a railway station may serve to conceal a social expression, has probably indeed been used for such a purpose before now, it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, may I ask you what you advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
Well, I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't know how I could possibly do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I, or Lord Bracknell, would allow our only daughter, a girl raised with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day! Oh, for goodness sake! Stop playing that ghastly tune out there! How idiotic you are!
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say that Gwendolyn refused you? I notice the way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it's most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is, but I'm pretty sure Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your aunt that way before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, or the smallest instinct of when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Oh, well, I'm not prepared to argue about it. You always seem to want to argue about things.
That's exactly what things were originally made for.
Oh, upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't suppose there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever these days. You can't seem to go anywhere without meeting clever people. It has become a public nuisance. Oh, I just wish to goodness that there were a few fools left.
There are.
Oh, I should greatly like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
Oh, what fools!
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about you being Ernest in the town and Jack in the country?
Oh, my dear boy, the truth isn't the sort of thing one should tell to a nice, sweet, simple girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Don't you worry about him. I think by the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy these days quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the kind of thing that runs in families. You would much better say a severe chill.
Are you sure that a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well. My poor dear Ernest, to be carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. Oh, that gets rid of him.
But I thought that you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Don't you worry about Miss Cardew. She is not a silly romantic girl, I am glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
Oh, take good care that you don't. She is excessively pretty, and she only just turned 18.
Does Gwendolyn know that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are perfectly certain to become extremely great friends. I bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other that after they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want a good table at Willis's, we really must go up and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what should we do after dinner? Go to the theatre?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
No, I hate talking.
Well, we might trot round to the Empire at 10.
No, I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. Although, I don't mind hard work if there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she could possibly do could alter my eternal devotion to you.
Gwendolyn, darling.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character is exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have, but what is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose?
Mm-hmm.
It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Darling.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will allow me to see you out to your carriage, Miss Fairfax?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir?
A glass of sherry, Lane. Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunbury.
Yes, sir?
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow is a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're the perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
That'll do, Lane, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now there goes a simple, intellectual girl. The only girl I have ever loved in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a dreadful scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only thing that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Oh.